Hello friends! So it has been 1 week since the bees have been installed into their hives, so it is now time to do an inspection, a checkup of sorts. So the doctor is in, or rather I am in, and we're going to do today our first inspection of the beehive. So to do the first inspection, I have a pair of gloves, my hive tool, a bee brush, my frame holders, more food to restock their feeder, and my new smoker. So the first thing I want to do is get the new smoker lit.
You really don't need all of that stuff. You really just need the hive tool, the smoker, and more food. Smoker comes with this little metal plate at the bottom. You need to push the legs all the way out, more than I have them here, and that helps the air get in from the bellows, and it prevents the fire from sitting on the bottom of the smoker and getting out of that same hole. For the fuel, I'm just using a combination of paper products, wood chips, and sticks, and just lighting it with a regular lighter. As for stuff you can burn in your smoker, you really want to try to use natural things. You can even use dry stuff you find on the ground. You want to make sure that the smoke is puffing white and not black or green or some other color, because that could imply you're burning something you shouldn't. And like I mentioned before about the fire being able to get out the hole in the bottom if the plate legs aren't high enough, yeah, this is where it comes in. And you want to be careful where you have the smoker because it lit some of the chips that didn't make it into the smoker. When you put it down when you're inspecting the hive, it's probably going to burn your grass, so be aware of that. If you have like a stone you could set it on, that would be best.
Okay, now is the time for the moment of truth. I'm going to open the hive, and I'm going to look for, most importantly, if the queen has been released and if they have started activity. All right, here we go.
This inspection will show you what a week's progress looks like for these bees.
I need to make sure that the smoke isn't hot. If I can take it with my hand in front of it, then it shouldn't be too hot for them.
Yeah, so the smoke needs to be cool and white. If you blow hot smoke at the bees, you can singe their wings, essentially destroying their ability to fly, and if the bees can't fly, that's sort of it for them. So there's a couple thoughts on why you use a smoker and why it's effective. The first one is that bees have a natural instinct to retreat into the hive and gorge on honey when they smell smoke, because in nature it would be like their forest is burning down and they might as well party as the world ends. And another reason would be it blocks a lot of their smell communications, so they can't all become alarmed and gang up against you.
I'm gonna give them some time, 30 seconds, to try to go back in. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so now I'm gonna take off the outer lid. So they've actually made comb on the top here.
Any of the comb that they made that isn't on the frames is called burr comb, and really we want to remove that because otherwise it will just continue to grow where it is and it'll make opening the hive harder. And as you can see, they are huddled around it, so they didn't really go into the box when I smoked them. They went to the burr comb, which isn't where I wanted them to be. They should be going inside the brood box. So every new box I'm taking off, I'm just smoking underneath it and waiting a second. So when I take it off, all the bees are sort of tucked away. One of the things I noticed about this hive compared to the second hive I will be inspecting after this is this hive had a lot of bees in it. I'm inspecting sort of later in the day, and it is possible that the number of bees is due to the fact that a lot of the worker bees have returned home for the evening. So you really want to try to inspect your hives somewhere midday if you can. to ensure that as many worker bees are outside the hive as possible, making this less overwhelming to go in and inspect your hive because you'll have less bees to deal with. So I'm working from one side of the box to the other, going frame by frame, being really careful and gentle not to crush any bees or to knock any bees off or disturb or break the frame somehow. And I'm just checking each frame, and I want to keep track of what progress they've made on each frame. Most importantly, I'm looking for the queen. I want to know if she has escaped her box and is out and about and alive and just doing her thing.
I'm looking for a red dot.
I'm looking for a red dot because she's marked with a red dot, and that will help me see her among the throngs of bees that are happening right here. You'll notice is that the bees start from the middle of the box, and as time goes on, they'll progress outwards to fill the frames that are on the outer side. So the first 3 I looked at were empty. There was no comb on it. There wasn't really any bee activity on it. But in the center, I think 3 frames, you can see they're all over it, and there's tons of comb there, and the queen is most likely there. But you do have to be careful because that's not guaranteed, that when you take off the feeder and you take off the top cover, that she's not on there. Because if she's on there and you put that down and she somehow walks off, that's not good. You've essentially lost the queen. Another note on inspection timing, make sure you give yourself plenty of time to do this. That way you don't feel rushed during an inspection. So this is perhaps the most important frame of this first inspection, is where the queen was stored in her box. I need to make sure that the candy is gone and she is no longer in there. There probably will be worker bees in there checking it out, but that's okay. I just need to make sure she's not in there, she didn't get trapped in there, she didn't die any there. As long as she's out of the box, things are probably okay. The issue I saw with the rubber band method of putting the queen cage onto the frame is the frame gets stuck to the queen cage, so when you take the queen cage off, you actually end up taking a chunk of the wax foundation out with it, which isn't super great. I suppose the bees will fill it in themselves, but just to warn you.
So I'm gonna leave these guys in the front of the hive so they can find their way back in.
In addition from working from the middle of the hive outwards, the bees will also work from the top of the frame downwards. I'm not really sure why, but here you can see, for the most part, the top third of this frame on both sides has comb on it. The other thing I saw inside of the comb are these different colored earwax looking stuff, and that's all the pollen they've collected. So that was the last frame that had any real bee activity on it. The last 3 frames, like the first 3 frames, were empty. So I didn't actually end up seeing the queen here. Mostly it was because I was sort of panicked with this being my first bee inspection, and I felt like there was sort of this time pressure I put on myself to do it, which really I should have just taken a deep breath and gone a little bit slower to feel more confident. And also I think because there just felt like there were so many bees here, I think maybe she was just underneath all the other bees on top of her. So when taking the frames in and out, you want to be really careful not to crush anything. I took the first frame out, and what I'm doing is taking out the frames, putting them back in, and then just sliding them over really gently to give the bees time to move out of the way. You really don't want to crush any bees because that's going to make them angry, and you don't want that. So doing a hive inspection is actually traumatic for the bees. You're basically going in and rearranging all of the silverware in the kitchen and then expecting them to find it again. So it takes a little bit of time for them to get back on track. But in order to help them do that, you want to put everything back exactly where you found it in the same orientation that you found it. This will help them get back on track faster. And the smoke also destroys or masks a lot of their pheromone communication. So it takes them a bit of time to recover from that and to reestablish those communicators. So you want to do as much as you can to help them get back on track after this inspection. You can do that by putting things back exactly the way you found them. Here I'm just carefully sliding the feeder back on, trying not to crush them, but rather push them out of the way. Then I'm going to remove the burr comb. It was probably a better idea to remove it first before putting it back on because it slides around. The stuff is actually kind of difficult to get off. It takes a little bit of force to do it. And you can see here they've built out actually on these raft floats, which is sort of funny. But they've shoved these combs full of the Pro Suite directly. So that's why they sort of put it there, because it was easy to store stuff in. It was close, it was nearby. This is also a good time to restock the feeder if you're low on food right now, because it's already open.
Wasting my time.
All the burr comb that you take off isn't a waste. Just because you're not going to have the bees use it doesn't mean you can't use it. So it's not necessarily a lot of wax depending on what you want to do with it, but it's enough to get you started with just experimenting with it. The last step is to close the hive up exactly the way I had it before, and then you're good to go. That's a hive inspection complete. On to our second hive inspection. So it's pretty much the same ditty as it was before, but it's really interesting to see how two different hives look after a week, because they do look different. I also completely gassed myself out right here. I was gagging. I did have to relight the smoker. It had basically died out during the first inspection. So this is a brand new smoker for this. It did not last this long. This was, I think, about 40 minutes in or so. It took me a while to do the first hive. Now into the good stuff. So going through the first couple frames here, we can already see there are less bees. I felt like there were so much less bees in this hive. So we go through and 3 frames are empty. There's no comb built out. There's not activity on it. And this is our first frame with activity. Only half a frame this time on this one. I'm looking for the queen. I'm checking for the queen. And look at all those bees. Look at that job they've been doing. They've got about the first third filled out, like again. And it's not a good idea to have the bees hold them over the grass. It's better to hold them over the hive when you're doing an inspection, so in case you drop a bunch of bees, they just fall into the hive. But I just wanted to show you what this frame looked like up close. Beyond the queen, it would be a really good sign to find eggs. I was really trying to look for them. I know they're small, but I just never found them in this hive or the other one. You can see this frame is super busy with bees. I really wanted to spend a good amount of time looking for the queen just because I was a little nervous about not seeing it in the last hive. I wanted to make sure I really spent time looking for her. This is good practice for me since this is the first time doing it, just to spot her and find where she is, and I wanted the assurance of finding the queen.
Rubber band broke on this one too.
Yeah, this is the important frame. Again, the vertical band broke on this, but the good news is the candy was also completely eaten on this one as well, and the queen was no longer inside of the queen cage. So hopefully that just means she's out there on the frames waiting for me to find her.
I see her! You see her up in this top left corner?
I was so happy to find the queen, you have no idea. I think I'll get better at spotting her with time. One of the things is the majority of the bees are like sedans, and she's like a semi. So it's kind of like you're looking for her, and then when you see her, you're like, wow, okay, that's her. You can't mistake her, but because there's so many other bees, it does take a bit of time to find her. It's far easier to look for her red dot, but I was so happy to see her. I didn't see any eggs, but I'm not gonna sweat that now because this was a lot, and I think I'll have better luck next week seeing them.
Thanks for watching. I know it didn't go entirely the way I wanted it to. I felt just a tad panicked at times, and I'm disappointed I didn't see the queen in the first hive, but there's a ton of bees in there, so I think maybe she was just covered by other bees. Like, there were significantly more bees in that one than in my hive. So I'm hoping next week I'll be able to see her, to find her. But since this is my first week, my first time ever doing this, all I can say is that I will only get better from here. So yes, we will improve. So I'll see you next week. I'm gonna do another hive inspection, and I'm just gonna do hive inspections every week until the end of this year. And it's recommended to do that for people who have never done hives before. This is your first hive, so I can really get familiar and confident with getting in and checking the bees and learning, you know, what they do, seeing what they do, and yeah, just, you know, provide for them. So I'll see you next week for the second hive inspection. All right, bye.
Yes.
I got a hitchhiker.
Got a hitchhiker.
There you go.